So for those of us who may be tuning in on Facebook, welcome. This is Ghost Town's Poetry Jams monthly open mic night. And we have some of our fantastic Ghost Town contributing artists, poets who have some material prepared for us to share. And actually, I'll turn it over to you, Peter, as we begin taking a look at Skunk Hour, and I will advance.
Right. So our idea here is to start our poetry jams by looking at a poem written at some point by a strong, a powerful poet, and of course Lowell was one of them. I'll read it as we go along, and then I thought we could discuss it, hear what Sarah has to say, what Jared, what Amy has to say, and then we'll push on from there. So we begin Skunk Hour. Nautilus Island's hermit heiress still lives through winter in her Spartan cottage. Her sheep still graze above the sea. Her son's a bishop. Her farmer is first selectman in our village. She's in her dotage. Thirsting for the hierarchic privacy of Queen Victoria's century, she buys up all the eyesores facing her shore and lets them fall. The season's ill. We've lost our summer millionaire, who seemed to leap from an LL Bean catalogue. His 9-yacht yawl was auctioned off to lobstermen. A red fox stain covers Blue Hill. And now our ferry decorator brightens his shop for fall. His fishnets filled with orange cork, orange his cobbler's bench and all. There's no money in his work. He'd rather marry. One dark night, my Tudor Ford climbed the hill's skull. I watched for love cars. Lights turned down. They lay together, hull to hull, with a graveyard shelves on the town. My mind's not right. A car radio bleats, love, oh careless love. I hear my ill spirit sob in each blood cell, as if my hand were at its throat. I myself am Hill. Nobody's here. Need to shift to the next. Okay, the next stanzas. Do you have the next stanzas up? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'll repeat those last couple of lines. I myself am hell. Nobody's here. Only skunks that search in the moonlight for a bite to eat. They march on their souls up Main Street. White stripes, moonstruck eyes, red fire, under the chalk dry and spar spire of the Trinitarian Church. I stand on top of our back steps and breathe the rich air. A mother skunk with her column of kittens swills the garbage pail. She jabs her wedge head in a cup of sour cream, drops her ostrich tail, and will not scare. Okay, he dedicated this poem to Elizabeth Bishop, who, as we know, was an extraordinarily acute poet, very, very, very careful and very precise in everything she did. I don't know how much further we can take that. For me, as a writer, it's just those first four words capture me. Nautilus, islands, hermit, heiress. Each of them falls so exactly into place. And then also the extraordinary way that the poem develops, twisting round into this sense of isolation and of having to encounter the skunks, which stand for his own fears. It takes an enormous amount of courage to write a confessional poem like this. Most people don't go anywhere near it. And I think that it was that sort of thing in Lowell that inspired Sylvia Plath. After reading Lowell, she felt very strongly moved to be able to go into her own crises as central to her poetry. One of the defenses that I'd make of Lowell would be from Abraham Maslow, the psychoanalyst, who said the normal adjustment of the average common sense, well-adjusted man implies a continued successful rejection of much of the depths of human nature. And I think that, most people are scared of those depths. And yet possibly that's where the strongest authenticity lies. I suspect that Lowell doesn't go all the way in this poem, but he does go incredibly far, and it's deeply uncomfortable. So you get the challenge that there is to many, many readers, and that is, what is the function of poetry? A cynical British poet once wrote, should poets bicycle pump the human heart or squash it flat? And in that cynicism, you get it. The way Lowell moves into the poem and develops the poem, and his strength, the strength of the writing as against his own feeling of instability, is the central conflict of the poem. So it's a poem that I've always remembered, but I'd like to hear what others have to say as well. So let me stop there.
Sarah, Amy?
Could you put the first verse or the first slide back on?
Oh, I can't, I can very faintly hear.
So I don't know, Sarah, maybe you have to.
I just turned my video off. It's distracting.
Okay.
This is a very minor thing, but it was one of the first things I noticed in that first 6 lines. There's a period. He has a sentence, and in the middle of the 4th line begins another sentence. So I noticed the unusual kind of structure in that text, because you normally kind of think of maybe a comma or maybe not even a sentence necessarily in a poem. So can you speak to that here? Is that something he does in a lot of his poetry? I thought it was very interesting.
Did you hear that? Are you able to hear that, Peter? She's speaking into her phone, but I'm afraid she may need to
very faintly, very, very faintly.
So she was referring to the 4th line of the first verse, where the first part, her son's a bishop, period, and then the beginning of another sentence. her
Yeah.
farmer is first selectman in our village. She was asking if that was, she was asking you to comment on that device and if that was a device that Robert Lowell had used a lot, maybe in other poetry.
I think it was.
No, he's often a very, very strongly traditional poet. He's New England, even a very, very strong religious theme runs through everything. And it's a struggle in his religion, because there are moments when he finds it very hard to believe. At other moments, he sees the darkness of God and these sorts of things. Here you have a free verse poem, which is fairly unusual. Towards the end of his selected poems, you get very, very well-worked sonnets. And there's, that's an incredibly tight form. Here he is working with a much more, using the spoken voice. So he uses rhythms of breath. So her son's a bishop. It's a clipped statement. And the bishop part of it, of course, is something, part of his religious type theme. Her farmer is first selectman in our village, semicolon. She's in her dotage. Notice that each is a step down from a bishop to the farmer to that she's in her dotage, and that visually that happens on the screen or on the page in front of you. Each is a step down. So you get the visual statement and the verbal statement are connected and actually fused. And that's what makes the poetry, I think. He certainly can pick up on her dotage, on the wanting to be like Queen Victoria, and what she has the power to do. She buys up all the eyesores facing her shore. But notice eyesores and shore, there's an implicit rhyme there, and lets them fall and all rhyme. Privacy and century are slant rhyme. So he's playing very subtly with the sorts of things that we often have in poetry, the structural importance of rhyme, but it's subtle. You hardly notice it until you begin to look very closely at the poem. Jared, what do you have to say? Sorry to pounce on you.
No, that's quite all right. So as you were reading it, and I had the impression that I was experiencing someone express something very personal about their inner life, but also there was a sense that what he was talking about with regards to his observation of his outer environment was very grounding as well. And
yeah.
I appreciated that. I appreciated that from my point of view, because I found myself in that situation before too, where there's a lot going on with my inner world, and as you've said, it takes tremendous courage to transmute that into an art form and put it out to share it with other people.
Oh yes.
But there was something really poetic, obviously really poetic, about the way he went about doing this, where it was almost as though I was invited to feel like I was him.
Yeah. Well, I think that's sorry to cut in, but it's an important point. You know, when we do great poetry, which comes to us in a different form, for instance, when we do something like this, the 23rd Psalm that everyone is familiar with, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. We don't then say, well, the poet is saying, I shall not want. We say, I shall not want. And I think that in a too careful an academic approach to poetry, we objectify what is really a deeply, it should be an inner experience. So I think that your feeling that, you know, that you were going through this is exactly as poetry should be read. Approach poetry. The I is the self. Really a deeply, it should be an inner experience. So I think that your feeling that, you know, that you were going through this is exactly as poetry should be read.
You just turn yours off.
Poetry. The I is the self. Really a deeply, it should be an inner experience. So I think that your feeling that, you know, that you were going through this is exactly as poetry should be read.
You just turn yours off.
Poetry. The I is the self. Really a deeply, it should be an inner experience. So I think that your feeling that, you know, that you were going through this is exactly as poetry should be read.
You just turn yours off.
Poetry. The I is the self. Really a deeply experience. So I think that you're feeling that, you know, that you. Well, talk about hammering the point home, huh?
Is it over? So I think something strange happened with Sarah was here in the gallery. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Funhouse. Sarah was here in the gallery and was using her phone, and all of a sudden on my screen where it has her image, it said Earthlink something. I think it was playing, it was like it was playing a recording of what her phone was hearing in the gallery. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Funhouse. What's happening? Sarah was here in the gallery and was using her phone.
Oh, it's doing it again.
Screen where it has her image. I wonder if it's the Facebook link something. I think it was playing, it was like it was playing a recording of what her phone was here in the gallery. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Funhouse. Sarah was here in the gallery and was using her phone.
Oh, it's doing it again.
Screen where it has her image. I wonder if it's the Facebook link something. I think it was playing, it was like it was playing a recording of what her phone was here in the gallery. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Funhouse. Sarah was here. Okay, that was it. Look, I just silenced Jean. Jean, I've silenced you. And that thing stopped. I don't know how that's happening. Okay.
A loop.
Hello, John. Welcome.
Hello. I finally got this thing to work.
So the next, we'll have to see if we can get Jean to be able to connect without doing that weird.
Yeah, that loop. Well, John, we've just done your least favorite poem, Skunk Hour, and
yeah, it really stinks, doesn't it?
There you go.
So I'm trying to unmute Jean at this point, and it's not working.
Okay.
Least favorite.
Oh, you're back, Jean. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really stinks, doesn't it?
Uh-oh, there we go.
It's
There goes
looping
the
with
loop again.
Facebook.
Okay, I took Jean away. I don't know, maybe, Jean, would you mind logging off and try to log in again? I don't know why it's doing that.
Is that better?
Yes,
Okay. Sorry about that.
it's okay. I don't know what was happening. I don't,
Well, yeah, it was my problem trying to log on so that I could join you.
but
Sorry.
it was in quadruplicate.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not savvy enough to know what I just did to screw things up. Sorry.
It's okay. Now it seems quite normal.
Okay.
Okay,
good.
so let's get back to this. So when we went awry, I had commented about from my perspective, the poem made me really invited me to feel as though I was having the experience from Robert Lowell's perspective, and then Peter was commenting that he thinks that that's what makes it quite effective, and now John says that it stinks. So let's resume from there.
Well, it is skunk hour.
That's right. Supposed to stink, I guess. And so, and I very much relate to, and Peter invited me to share this, wanted to share this Abraham Maslow quote.
Hold on.
Okay. It also to stimulate the conversation in response to the piece. So I relate to this very much, and in my own experience, I've found that I go through these cycles of wanting to, as Peter, as you said, have the courage to share some of that innermost stuff that would make one appear to be not well adjusted. So I cycle from periods where I am more open about that kind of stuff, and then I retreat from it, and I'm trying to get. I want to be better at holding myself in that vulnerable, expressive space, because I agree with what you said, which is that we have to understand that we're all kind of pretending to be perfect if we're not relating to each other in that way. And in the periods of time where I try to keep things in and not express them or share them, it makes me wompy.
Yeah, it's a struggle of writing poetry, of writing anything. Sarah, is there anything more you'd like to say before we move on? And I didn't hear anything from Amy. Sorry, I'm out here and I'm all ears, and I'm still partly in academic mode, so you'll have to just ignore that or swat me down. Okay.
I'm just here as an appreciative observer. I entered like halfway through the poem, and I had just used some eye drops that make my vision very blurry for a few minutes. So I'm just observing at this point, or listening in at this point.
Oh, okay.
And Sarah has the podium, so she.
No, I really don't. I just want to be up here in case I need to say something.
Oh, so the answer to Peter's question is you don't have anything more you would like to.
No, I don't have anything more.
Okay.
I
invited
want
you.
to say a few things.
Sure.
Lowell, of course, is a fascinating figure. And if you're not familiar with him and his work, you should definitely look him up. He taught, I think Peter said that, didn't you, that he taught Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton. He, was a very, which you said too, a very good friend of Elizabeth Bishop's. And my favorite poem of Bishop's is The Art of Losing, which is a poem we should look at sometime too. But yeah, he's a fascinating figure, and he dealt with what we now call bipolar disorder, and grew up in a very wealthy family and had all of this ancestry to deal with. Wasn't one of his ancestors a judge in the Salem witch trials? Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, he's really embedded in the whole Massachusetts history. Mm-hmm. And it was very sticky for him, as you're suggesting, to try and get out of all that. And he has got some of the stiffness of New England. I actually did my master's in the the very room where he did where he taught both Sylvia Plath and Sexton. Just a very ordinary room, but it had the ghosts of Lowell and Sylvia Plath and everyone around, I can tell you. My favorite poem of his is probably Quaker Graveyard at Nantucket, which is a tremendously powerful poem. But he wrote many, many very, very, very powerful poems, very strong in his statements. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that strength that even though there's a lot of time where he feels that poetry is insignificant and that he's struggling against the general sense of insignificance in poetry. And I think we can all relate to that. We know how the society around us usually regards poetry. If it's not Hallmark card, it's too difficult.
Did he do one for the Confederate dead too?
Yes, yes,
Which is
yes,
also a really powerful poem.
yes,
We're
yes. A
looking
very,
at.
very, very powerful poem.
Yeah, especially now, you know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
For the next poetry jam, we have to come up with another poem, and I just put this forward because I thought it would be fairly, well, knowing John's opinion on it, I thought it'd be fairly controversial. But I think he has made his comment. It stinks. Is that right, John?
Well, that was perhaps I was being a little too abrupt. Skunk Hour is a marvelous poem. It does have the, Lowell's, assuming that this is Lowell. I mean, he is one of the quote confessional poets, but it has his perception of where he is, and you get the panorama both of what you're seeing before you and why, and then he takes you up to where the lovers are, and they're right up against where there's a graveyard, and then he brings you down to animal life, and I guess the mother skunk who will not be scared away is a very interesting character, even though she lowered her ostrich tail. So it's not one of my favorite Lowell poems, but I was being flip.
Always what I ask fellow poets when they read a poem like this is, what does it make you feel like writing? And I think that that's one of the ways, one of the good things about doing a poetry jam is that we should strike sparks of one another and keep poetry going, keep our own poetry going. It's not necessarily an easy question to answer. What does this make you feel like writing? But one of the questions I also like to ask is, what does a poem want? What does a poem want? And the answer is quite simple, but also unforgettable. It wants another poem. And I think that's a way for writers in particular to read, is not to particularly get into literary critical mode, which can objectify in a way which distances the poem. That's why I suggested that Jared's way of reading, beginning to identify with the poem, is stronger, in my opinion, for poets, whereas critics like to distance themselves. Some talk of being disinterested, only looking on the poem as an object. And I think that can work for some people, but it certainly doesn't work for most of the poets I've known. So I think that that's one of the ways we can go about our poetry jams is, listening and being engaged in a way that will make us have a sense of where we want to go to with our own work.
I like that. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Sure.
I know what it makes me want to write. You'll have to wait until next month.
Oh, we look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay, shall we roll on? Jared?
Yes, so we can skip around in the PowerPoint order as we wish, but I've placed all of your stuff next, Peter, so.
Yeah, maybe I've been doing too much talking. Doesn't someone else want to go?
Who do we want? Do we want to skip ahead? We can come back to you.
Yeah. What about Sarah or John or Jean?
Sure, I can go.
Okay. Let me find you, Jean. I can see your face somewhere here.
There we go.
Thank you for doing this, Jared.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, this makes it a lot easier.
Well, we have to thank John for the inspiration to put this stuff on the screen. Oh, I guess it doesn't let me go. Maybe I pushed the wrong button. John had the inspiration for this format, and I think if I can get my act together, it's the way to go for sure. So
Yeah, this is nice.
Yeah, it really works to, we all are literate poets, and so our work needs to be read as well as sounded out.
Right.
agreed.
Okay, you want me to read this?
Yes, ma'am, you have the podium.
Okay. Voyage without motion. The universe is more finely spun than any story. A truth container is circuit in use, torrent of wired memory, discharging sense. The ocean curls a secret in an ear-shaped shell. Creation billows. We cook it down to words. Listen to wind in the leaves, consider the sun. Maybe words are too close, say too much, but leave everything out.
Wow. Yeah.
I love this, Gene. The universe is more finely spun than any story. Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And leave everything out, which is exactly what the words do.
And no punctuation. It's left out at the end.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Right.
great. That's the visual and the actual statement concurring. Great.
Mhm.
Next one.
Okay.
Eager to see more.
The room is papered with departure. Cotton panties at the seaside, white as sails. He wore them on his head for the picture. I didn't know what to say when he flashed that grin and his girlfriend's red tube top on his flat-chested frame, her shorts tight above his hairy legs. Lipstick blurred his face, yellow with age. What does it mean for something to be true? Gaudy handwriting obliterates the page. In the future, you won't memorize the silences among endless, icy regrets. Everywhere, without knowing it, we suffer time.
Well, it's the completeness of the two poems, the way they are clinched at the end, which really is impressive to me. I struggle with endings.
They're hard.
And you seem to just make a very careful curve round to the ending, and then we have it. Wow.
Sarah is saying, I don't know if you guys can hear her from the gallery.
Okay, thanks. This is actually about someone you know, John.
Oh, good. You'll have to tell me sometime.
My ex.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to say, this is someone I don't know, but this conjured up very vivid images in my imagination.
Good.
From the very beginning. I mean, I was picturing, there are probably layers of things that it would take me a while to really understand, but I was really picturing this very interesting place, and the use of the word gaudy, handwriting, and the room papered with departure. I don't know if it turns out in my imagination to look exactly like a situation or an environment that you remember, but there was a powerful thing there.
Good. Yeah, it shouldn't look like anything that's going on in my mind. You know, you should read it however you want.
Good.
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah, I sent one more. Dysphagia. Structure eludes me, the wild animal struggling toward thought, in love with the rhythm of form. Shapes overlap, undefined. I am their common denominator at the intersection of eyes. My ears hesitate. A raptor waits, graceful, to pierce the movement of sound. Its talons shore my absence, make hollowness a charm. So they're all kind of about emptiness in a way, you know, or the what's the word I want? The inability of words to actually convey what we experience. That's partly what's going on there with all three.
And yes, it's very lovely.
Yeah.
Makes hollowness a charm. Yeah. Again, there's tremendous gracefulness in your writing, Jean. And, you know, I admire that. I feel like such a clodhopper in comparison. It's so, you know, the gracefulness is just very lovely, in love with the rhythm of form. Each line is, you know, balanced in itself and leads to the next line without being, you know, stuck on its own, in its own position.
Yeah, that's something I really worked on, was enjambment or enjambment.
Yeah, I rather call it enjambment. I can't do the
Yeah.
French feels pretentious to me, but
Right.
you know, I know students used to say to me, enjambment.
Right.
I think it's better to just say jamming it up.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I'm good at jamming things up.
There you
Yeah.
go. It's-
Sarah's asking for a clarification of this concept of enjambment and
right.
what that means.
Oh, it means the way you end your lines. Ideally, what a poet wants to do is end the line in such a way that as it's, each line says something by itself, but then when you go to the start of the next line, that if you choose your enjambment properly, that alters how you read the first line or the line above it. So like struggling toward thought in love, okay, but then you read what I'm in love with, and that alters what you thought. And so it's a way of making the meaning more complicated, because the references change as you read the poem when you can enjam that way.
And that's kind of what I was noticing in Lowell's poem, perhaps. There was the end of the sentence and then the beginning of the next one on the second line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is with poetry, the sentence and the line are not the same. And so you can play with that, you know, the sentence as opposed to the line. It gives you a lot more opportunities for meaning and sometimes contradictory meanings, which is always great in poetry.
That's eye-opening. Thank you.
So when I read this, Jean, it was bigger for me. I received it. It wasn't simply relating to crafting words, but just giving in the first stanza where you're talking about the wild animal. Like in my imagination, I kind of think of that as sort of this intuitive, ancient, you know, like feminine energy, like creative, intuitive stuff, and then all of that, which we're all tapped into to some degree, giving that form in the real world and making something that is manifested and tangible is, you know, when I start thinking about shapes, and then you being, I kind of had this image of you as sort of as a conductor, craftsman kind of, but then the very end where you just release and make hollowness the charm, made me smile.
Oh, good. Yeah, I sort of see poems as crystals. You know, like when I think about what a poem is, it's like it's a crystal, and there are so many different ways of looking into it, you know. And yet what we're trying to capture with our words is always elusive. You know, you can kind of point and give someone a vision, but the words, all they can do is point. You know, it has to happen in your brain. So it's, you know, the poem is I don't know, it's formula, I guess, for reaching some kind of state. Who is it who said the poem is a machine?
I don't know, but he
Oh.
should be shot. I think that what you were just saying reminds me of the old Zen statement that the poem is a finger pointing to the moon.
Ah, yes, yes, exactly.
Well, I have a tendency, I mean, I certainly appreciate wanting to receive it in the way that it reaches me, but I have a tendency to want to understand where the artist was and what was motivating them to share that in that way. So like I want to be in you looking at this through the crystal and as you kind of turn the crystal, experiencing it with you and through you. Maybe that's why I felt like I was experiencing Robert Lowell when we read Skunk.
Well, that's the kind of question that a creative person asks. How did this get written? And it can mark something of the difference between the critic and, of course, these are not hermetically separated, the critic and the writer, but writers often ask the question, how did you get to do that? How did you do this? How did you do that? Rather than what exactly are you saying? The point of what exactly are you saying is the stumbling point there is the exactly, because the poem is actually multidimensional. Right. And they want to bring it down to a unidimensional statement. And even, one of the big philosophers in our tradition, Immanuel Kant, said, forget it. Reason can't encapsulate what poetry is doing. But of course, nobody pays any attention to him. They just carry on trying to get what you're saying. And then sometimes this can be horribly reductionist.
Yes.
A friend of mine reading the Shakespearean sonnet said, well, he's saying he loves her. Well, that's all. Okay. If that's all, then, then I give up.
Right. Yeah. Have you read the Billy Collins poem about reading poems?
I don't think so.
It's a great one. I'll try to find that for us for next time, but he's
great.
The students want to beat it with a chain to figure out what it means.
Yeah, I know what it means.
Yeah.
Got to be unidimensional about it. Forget it. The poem is a crystal. It's multidimensional. It's got lots of facets.
Yes.
Yes.
And often the poet doesn't know what it means.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good. It means that you're dealing with more than just the top of your head.
Right.
Which Lowell calls his turtle, by the way. The top of his head's this kind of turtle shell. I think is very, very endearing.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Emily Dickinson talked about a good poem taking the top of her head off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and it can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not for most of my students, though. They wanted to beat it with chains. Yes.
Yes. Right.
Sarah has a thought, so she's going to speak loudly.
I'm going to speak loudly. Well, in all of that discussion and the poetry, Gene, it makes me feel better because the things that I write basically have come through years of journaling and just kind of putting down things that weren't supposed to be poetry, but sometimes they felt like poetry just as I wrote it. I couldn't just write it in sentences. But so working through the poetry workshops has kind of brought something else out, a poem, so to speak. But to be honest, it's what you are describing in that crystal kind of symbolism. So it makes me feel better that I can't just say what exactly they mean or what they were supposed to say, but and I can't exactly bring it out to someone else because it's all interior.
Right. Yes, and one of the things I love about poetry, and what I've always told my students is, poetry can include nonsense. It doesn't have to make sense, and it often doesn't, and that's great.
Rothko, I don't quite know how you pronounce his name, R-O-E-T-H.
Yeah, Rutger.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, he, at the end of his courses, he would get students, they had to write an exam in poetry because of the college, really. They had to write a sonnet, but the only rule was that it was not allowed to make any sense.
That's great. Yeah, because you can't, if you could boil it down to words, then you would write in prose, because prose is about this and this and this happens, and then you get this result, but poetry is not like that. It's not narrative, not necessarily.
I like to see it as always dramatic, but not necessarily narrative. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is John going next, Jared?
That works for me. Does it work for John?
That's fine.
Oh, good.
We begin with Detritus.
Hi, Gene.
Hey.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah,
everybody.
John.
Okay, so I'm not seeing the words on the screen, but that's okay. There we go. Oh, okay.
I don't know what I did.
Okay. So, okay.
Is there T missing there? Should it be detritus?
Yeah. It's all right.
Okay.
We've
compensated by seeing what should be there, right?
Yeah, it's detritus. Okay. Two houses, alike in decrepitude, soon demolished for civic revival. Within the squat brick ranch in solitude, he died, then she, dirty white vinyl clad bungalow, her suicide arranged, caterwauling all day, drew a neighbor, widower, no child, her divorced, estranged from son, both homes sold as is together. None knew their passion, living close apart. Sonnets to him and portraits of her posed filled the walls in both homes. But his heart gave out, and in her grief she overdosed. All belongings sold or trashed, buildings razed, save for one last sonnet, by love amazed.
I love it.
A few words about it. I was thinking of Romeo and Juliet. That's why it starts the way it does. Okay, because
Two
of
houses.
the way, two houses, and then it's it comes out of seeing two houses near Austin College that were knocked down and razed, and before that happened, they were selling what was in the house, and I went in there, and one of the things, there were clothes, there were stuffed in drawers and what have you, and that's what made me think about about kind of stumbling into what's left.
Yeah.
Detritus of our lives. But I wanted to end it with by love amazed. So that's my sonnet.
Well,
And
man,
I'm sticking to it.
yeah, I always take my hat off, my non-existent hat at the moment, to anyone who can write a sonnet.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
It's such a tight form. And, the last three words here really make it. That they're amazing in themselves, because they bring everything into focus. The really calm, quiet way you've described it all, and then suddenly by love amazed.
We were talking about what does a poem mean, or what is a poem supposed to do, and so forth. And for me, and I heard great things from both Peter and Gene. For me, being a reference librarian for most of my life, for me, poetry is both is referential. It's whether it points you to somebody else's work that you admire or want to pull into yours, or some other kind of reference that you can, point to the moon, or with Jean's poem, you can envision the raptor with the talons and what that's going to do. Just either drawing your imagination somewhere, a reference that you have to a raptor flying, or to the skunks, running about eating trash. But there's something there that it has to call something up in you. And so it's that combination of things.
So you won't like the language poets, will you, John?
No, no. As Peter and I have discussed on many occasions, I'm not a big fan of certain aspects of postmodernism.
I love the language poets.
I understand what Jean said with regards to and about writing nonsense, or not really writing it, but incorporating, let's say, words that put together seem nonsensical, and they may be, but they may also by being joined together, create their own sparks. It's kind of like, I remember reading about and watching whose film was it? Breathless, with Gene Seberg and Jean-Paul Belmondo, and how it was put together. We don't these days. We see so much of jump cuts of here's an image, then we'll shift to something that is not necessarily narratively apart, but it causes us to join them together in some way or other. And that's what I find when I'm faced with what you could call nonsense verse is what's hitting up against there. So anyway.
Yeah. Beautifully crafted, John.
What?
It's beautifully crafted.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Really admire.
Yeah, well, I won't beat it anymore with a chain. Okay. This is another quote, taking something from Shakespeare. But who best to steal from, right? Who better to steal from? What dreams may come. Gently lay me down to sleep. Promises I've none more left to keep. If I should die before I wake, what dreams will my spirit undertake? Quiet never known to me? Or will I find no place to be, released from worry, sorrow, spite, or grief, from love, compassion, joy, serenity? Pluck up courage, awaken me to once more trick our daily thief.
Each day stolen.
Yeah. The time, time is our life as our life goes, and what happens. So, but I also I'm intrigued, as I said the last time we were doing this, I'm intrigued by nursery rhymes and the kinds of rhyme and that oftentimes happens when you're a child and your parent has a bedtime story or a bedtime rhyme or something like that, and there's part of that, certainly part of that with this. Lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Kind of thing. But since my view of God is somewhat unbounded, you know, it's not one of the things to throw in here. So pluck up courage,
I like that line.
pluck up courage.
Did you hear Sarah? She said,
Yes, she liked that line. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really love the structure of it too.
thanks.
Yeah, really interesting. Have you thought about breaking it, putting, well, we don't have to do that, but it's a beautiful
Okay.
structure. I like the way that it goes from me, you know, it's like a palindrome kind of.
Kind of goes back. Well, since most of the poems I write, I have multiple versions of.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I haven't split it up into just 2 lines, stanzas as they work out: sleep, keep, wake, take, me, be, grief. But
Right.
at the last, I didn't want to do, I had grief and thief ended and serenity in me. So
Mhm.
to break it up, because it can become monotonous. Yeah.
a quiet never known to me.
Yeah.
That kind of struck me. It's interesting to be aware of something that you want that is eluding you.
Yeah.
Seems some people aren't aware of of some things that I want them to want, but
Yeah. Well, some of the central part of the poem, "A Quiet Never Known to Me," that comes from, in some ways, comes from A Tale of Two Cities, where Sidney Carton, at the end of his life, about to have his head lopped off and gone through a lot of grief, wonders about, will he have a quiet that he's never known before? And anyway, as I said, these are the references that come to me at times when I'm trying to deal with, an emotion, a feeling, a thought. I draw on some of the literature that's other people have written that strikes me in a way, and I want to kind of weave it in there. If you are, if you're aware of this as you're reading it, then I want you to be aware of it. I want you to think, oh, does this remind me of this? And then you say, well, I wonder what that was. Let me go look it up. And it's so, as I said, that's part of being a reference librarian.
do you hear that, John? Sarah says you're a reference poet.
A reference poem. That's probably the best. Yeah. Okay, this one, I
Oh.
think I better do this. Okay. How do we describe love? Question. For Nell on her birthday. Books have been written, and there will be more, and plays, films, songs, and poems. But I'm thinking it's like making a puzzle too, where love comes in a large cardboard box and has 25,000 pieces, and the illustration, the one we look at to guide us along, changes each day. Some people get bored making a puzzle together and leave to watch something on TV, while others give up when what they have in hand won't fit anymore. A few drop pieces on the floor and never look, abandoning what they've done so far. Why is that, I wonder? First, we find all the edges, creating an outline of love, and slowly we work from within, matching our pieces together. That dab of blue on the edge of one you have fits a place in the sky, touching the roof of our house, added moments ago by me. Trees shade and dapple the lawn until we arrive at where there's summer's yellowy brown. Now trees are blazing from the waning sun, and now litter the lawn with what squirrels taste and throw down. As more pieces fit into place, There's us with coffee. Must be morning. Now sipping martinis some Friday afternoon. And you see our girl looking amazed, with her gaze looking all around at everything and growing. And she's amazing too. Once upon a time, thousands of pieces covered every floor of our home and into the yard. In spite of rain, sleet, or snow, just a few left and we're done. In that bottom corner of this puzzle we've made, that's us, finally turning in for bed. I thought I should give you a love poem in the midst of what might be doom and gloom.
It's lovely.
Thanks. Thank you, Jean.
Yeah, it brings out, brings really wonderful images. And I like the idea of love as a puzzle. That makes so much sense. Because it is, you're right.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good description of what love is.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
changes and changes every day.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
It's beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah, I like the calmness and the gentleness of the poem very much,
Mhm.
and the way it goes through the sense of a whole day passing by
Mhm.
and a whole lifetime together passing by.
Yeah.
The big picture and the small pieces.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was, part of it is reflecting on, what is it? Half of the people that marry, divorce for various reasons, that have to. So I, kind of pointed at that. Things happen. But I also, one of the things was this, I'd seen an illustration somewhere where, a very large scene of something, somebody had managed to take the image or whatever and of this very large scene and create it as if it was a large puzzle with a couple of pieces kind of coming off an end. So,
I think it was interesting for me to feel the transient nature of it's like the puzzle was, there was a little bit of feeling like it was remaking itself with the suggestion of the changing of the seasons and
yeah.
a puzzle which normally you buy a box with all the pieces and it's a fixed thing, but this was a puzzle that was not static.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Jared. Okay, so this poem comes out of my thinking about what has been going on and this question of white privilege. White privilege. I wake up every morning and go to the bathroom to pee, to wash my hands, to brush my teeth, to shave this aging face. It never enters my head, darling. I could be shot because of race. I don't fear going out the door. I'm not afraid of the police knocking me about or killing me. In fact, I don't think about it at all. While driving my car, I'm not afraid, if stopped for a traffic violation, about where my hands are as I fumble to find where I put the registration. I don't worry each and every day I'll be mistaken for a taller man, or one shorter, or thinner, or fatter, because we don't all look alike in this white skin.
Wow. Although I've heard that we do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that last, I mean, I have heard that last bit, but with black skin,
Yeah.
with so many times over the course of my life and where I've lived. And you see it played out
Mhm.
over and over again. I mean, you know, so-and-so is stopped, and, you know, the description of who the person is obviously not the person who stopped. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
and then, but to have white privilege is to not worry about any of that.
Mhm.
Nell and I were listening. We haven't finished it yet. We were listening to Ta-Nehisi Coates' book,
Mm.
Between the World and Me,
Yeah.
and his conversation, or his conversation, so to speak, with his son, in describing how he needed to present himself to the world, to the white world, to police, and to be careful, and what not to say, and what to always be mindful of. And that's what struck me in terms of white privilege, because I don't think we have to do that, or we, you know, it just doesn't come up. So anyway, that's.
I think the tragedy of Black America is that, having been stripped of their African cultural identity, they're left only with race. Coming from Africa, I know that African people have the depth of an incredibly complex culture within them and behind them. And African Americans have built up a culture of resistance. You know, you get it in hip hop, you get it in everything. You know, James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and everything. So they've been driven into this position of having only and being identified only in terms of race. I don't want to go on and on about my own experience, but it was interesting to me that a man became mayor of the last city I lived in, which is Port Elizabeth, on the east coast of South Africa. It's the third largest city. He's a white man. He became mayor because he can speak Xhosa. And it just shows that there's something else going on in my own country at the moment, very, very different. And many of the white people, particularly the Afrikaners who lived on, mainly the rural people, were fluent in African languages. But Americans have only the resistant dialects, which I resist calling dialect. I would call them languages. They're languages of resistance. You get it in the wire. But they really have been stripped of so much, except for one thing, and that is African orature, the power of speech, which you can hear from their preachers, which you can hear in the greatest of the American orators, it's Martin Luther King. That's pure African stuff. And even slavery couldn't stamp that out. But my God, they've been torn, everything else has been torn away from them.
Except music.
Right.
Well, that's the other African thing.
Which comes out of that.
African thing.
I mean, if without the music, how impoverished certainly would we be without the blues, without jazz, without even country music. I mean, so much without that running through.
Those are the things that are perfectly African. I mean, African dance, song, drumming, all of those deep, deep rhythms come from Africa. but it's still fairly thin. In just in my experience, but I do deeply appreciate things like blues and hip hop. In fact, I would sometimes tease African American students of mine and say to them that I'm African American, they're American African, and we'd laugh about that because in a way it was so true. African Americans are Americans first. When African Americans go again to my own country, South Africans will tease them about looking for their roots, things like that. And they really are a bit irritated because quite often because there's such a disconnect. But I heard of a woman, an African American woman who had returned to Ghana. I heard her on NPR on the World, and she spoke brilliantly about the wreckage that America is. That it's just this unfettered, insane capitalism of this place. So I think there's a tremendous power in African American stuff, and I was on a panel on race in South Africa at Dallas, in Dallas University. I forget the exact name of the panel, but I was on there with numerous other South Africans, and at one time, John and Jean and everyone else, a white man sitting beside me was asked by a young African American woman in the audience if he was aware of any white privilege while he was in South Africa. And he said no. I could easily have killed him, silly bastard. I mean, okay, I can't even go on. All right. Yeah, all right, enough.
Wonderful poem, John.
Thank you, Jean.
And Sarah has a comment.
I think,
Yeah.
we're all.
Jerry, can you translate Sarah for me, because I can't hear her at all?
I think she's coming forward to the podium.
Well, I would,
Okay.
this issue of white privilege, I think from generation to generation, we're faced with re-accepting, redefining, or meeting the idea that we have white privilege. And I have a wonderful muse who is of African American descent, and we used to work together, and we were instant friends, and she was very honest with me about what I didn't know. By being white, you just don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you have to be told, and she was very willing to tell me. And I think that we sometimes reach a point, even when we think we've learned a lot, that another page or our scales are ripped from our eyes again, and we see deeper. And I think that's what is happening for many of us right now, even those of us who counted ourselves as aware of our white privilege. But I've been in the poetry sessions, we've talked about me and my family history, and there's a term I've used, coined a little phrase of verbal DNA. And I think my verbal DNA, the stories that come down from my family, have caused me, even in this last month, to come to an intersection of some of my own more recent family history, grandfathers and great uncles that participated even just as part of a crowd here in Sherman in 1930. Wow. And so, I think I've been ignoring a lot of that, even though I've known the stories. And now here we are with a young man in Sherman who has the same last name as the man who was in the courthouse.
Oh, wow.
I have a grandfather that could have been the supplier of some of the dynamite get him out of the,
Mm.
you know, and I just think even my own white privilege that I think I don't have to encounter is just really coming up and slapping me in the face. And it's just, you know, so your last phrase says, I don't think about it at all. I think that's my story. I don't think about it at all.
Mhm.
Well, the stuff you've spoken of, Sarah, is tremendous. I have to say, you're always with writers, the worse the better. Tremendously powerful stuff for your own writing. Don't forget about that.
Yeah.
I don't.
Because, you know, I mean, I've got a bunch of crazies in my family, which you know, they're almost, they're so far beyond right wing that they're, you know, they become ridiculous.
Mm.
And their name is Niemand, which means no one. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it all. As a writer, as a human being, I can be appalled, but, you know, hell, aren't we appalled by, you know, Othello going in and saying, put out the light, and then put out the light. Yeah. No, it's terrific stuff for us. I'm afraid to say we mustn't shrink away from it. We must take on the stature of it and
Yeah.
bring it into our writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Sure. You're welcome. I think maybe moving on to something else.
Okay.
Should we
Else.
do Shannon's
Um,
quickly, because it'll save us a little time, and my dogs are going to chew my ankle off if I don't take them soon enough for their
so you would
nightly
rather
walk.
do Shannon's instead of some of yours?
Yeah, I'll do Shannon's, you know, just one after the other, and then we can go to either Sarah's or mine.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sure.
So this is called Cut the Cake.
Wow.
Okay, lady, let's cut the cake. Remains of design have been pecked over beyond compromise. Now you want a bigger slice, but at a lower price. I'd have to remove my heart to continue this charade.
Nice.
I like the rhythm of it, the choppy rhythm, the cutting rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very nice.
I don't know if it's because I know Shannon, but I can hear her very personal voice with the "okay, lady."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish you would.
Oh, did I? Is this
Go on.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
let's go on.
That's my fault. I forgot.
No, it's okay. You know, we can do poems by piece.
Yeah.
You see, a machine is what you crave. Pressing crumbs to mass production is the death of creativity, which is the birth of apathy, has filled the cavity in my chest, and my heart
Wow.
no longer fits.
Nice.
It's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to compliment her on it. Actually, when I put it on the slide, I hadn't read it all yet, so
Yeah.
really great. There's a song lyric that it reminds me of, and it's really poignant when you're trying to express the idea of empathy for anyone who's experiencing any pain or suffering. The song lyric is take your heart out of your holster.
Yeah.
Imagine instead of guns, we have our hearts in holsters and we take them out and fire love bullets.
Mhm.
This is one of my favorite poems of hers.
Wow.
To Mrs. J.B., who left the cruise too early. Tell me, did they ever find your body? Washed ashore some strange land, a mild annoyance among the living. Where you discovered skull cracked, ribs open, empty of heart and brain, flesh rotted away from recognition, tiny nibbles off your toes. Did they grant you a place to rest your bones? Or did they burn you to ash and return you to the deep? Lost at sea, a place you chose to be. And it's those final three lines, the kind of taunting of the almost the childish nursery rhyme taunt, and also the fact that Shannon has a terrific photograph to go with this, and of course it comes from a real incident that happened when she was on a cruise. There was a altercation between a man and his wife, and the woman grew angry and jumped overboard.
Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah. Wow.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
Overcast in limbo. There is no sun. There is no sun. There is no sun for my nourishment. I eat the greens, the yellows, the oranges. I do the yoga, take the walks, and have the talks with ears lent to me. I count my breath, my fingers, my blessings. I swallow the vitamins, the supplements, the prescriptions, like tiny pops of poison. I've said the prayers, did the rites, got that extra hour of sleep. And still, there is no sun. There is no sun. There is no sun.
Yeah.
Not a place you want to be.
Mhm.
Yeah, the triple repetition there.
Mm.
Of there is no sun. There is no sun. There is no sun. Wow.
Mm.
That reaches the point where you can't talk anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
Things just reach that sort of, it's a blank wall.
Mhm.
Yeah. The incredible, was it incredible darkness of what can happen to a life, to a mind.
Yeah.
Overcast in limbo.
I count my breath, my fingers, my blessings. Mm.
Yeah.
Because they tell us when we are down that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Breathe in for a count of 7 and hold it for a count of 7 and count your blessings and don't feel sorry for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Comes a point where those things just don't work anymore.
Yeah.
And this actually, Peter, I think
that
you would agree, maybe is a good expression of the Maslow idea that, I mean, Shannon's being very vulnerable here.
Yes, she is.
And I think it took a lot of courage to put this down and then to share it. But I think all of us who are reading it and are relating to it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I just can't imagine that there are people out there who can't, at some level of their consciousness, remember a moment where they were not well adjusted. And I think, Gene, you said Robert Lowell was dealing with bipolar, which, I mean, a lot of sensitive people, probably artistic, creative, sensitive people, probably could receive a diagnosis of that as a disorder, because our culture is telling us that it's not okay to be that way.
Right.
Yep. This is the cuckoo's nest.
Yeah.
Right.
I eat the greens, the yellows, the oranges. It's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have looked at, obviously you're aware of the colors related to the chakras of any chakra system, but I've been looking at research for making sure that your diet contains the colors of food that will nourish each of the chakras. So if you need to nourish your root chakra, eat red.
Right.
Vegetables, if you need to nourish your heart, eat green.
Right.
To nourish your third eye and your crown chakra eat blueberries and blackberries and those kinds of things. So I wonder
I
if
better watch out. I eat too many blueberries. Something will happen. My forehead will flop open.
yeah, you'll get stuck in the ether. And
Yeah, I could. I think I am.
I think I agree. Okay.
Where's Sarah? Let's hear Sarah.
Are you ready, Sarah? Okay, I'm going to ask her to navigate her. Let's see. I don't know how I keep getting out of the share, but let's do this again.
I just punched that.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm going to move the cursor down to where the arrow will appear, and then all you have to do is punch on it.
Now Sarah has to go to the podium. Yes.
Yes, I'm at the podium. And I don't know whether to tell you before or after about, maybe I'll do it after, about what the context of the poem. No summer camp. City names intrigue. Whisper the exotic. Tegucigalpa, Jutacapa, El Hobo, Rancho Parisio. Breaths of fragrance laden with hint of banana and mountain of pine. Slight sense of familiar hangs in the ephemeral crispness of altitude, the slow struggle of buses on a steep road. Boys and girls languidly hold hands. Slow roads elongate, pinch inward. Buses narrowly pass window to window. The eyes of each stare to catch glimpses of the others in wordless exchange. The gun stashed under the driver's belt, his foot held heavy on the gas pedal, bursts any notion of nostalgia, belies the serenity of the scene, reveals poverty of resource, violence that dominates to claw soft underbellies. Brown boys and brown girls languidly hold hands. Honduras, assailed by its cone, unsolvable paradox, met encrusted faces of brown boys and brown girls. The unanswerable wells up from deep within blue-black eyes, demands to be answered. That sacred absurdity screams, and concrete blisters little bare feet, an inquisition on behalf of the abandoned. Head bowed, I draw a blank and avert my eyes. So that came from a trip long ago to Honduras and into the interior part. It took 2 days after the trip to Tegucigalpa on a plane, and then into a bus with an armed guard, and one night inland, and then on into the interior. And I wrote things in a journal that entire week and a half we were there. And so this kind of has evolved from some of my notes within that journal, but it has been added to and worked on and amplified, and I guess is still a work in progress through the poetry sessions that I've done with Peter and the others. And so it became more than just something that I journaled, but the same feeling has emerged from it. So anyway, I don't know.
It's very powerful.
Well, it's a very
Yeah, it starts out, seeming sort of innocent and, holiday, then it becomes so incredibly profound, at the end.
That's the experience felt. I mean, we were going down and knowing that we were going to be doing some educational improvement in some small villages, and some medical people were with us, and Honduran run institution, organization. But getting off of the plane and getting on that bus and going up into those mountains was it felt like you were going to summer camp kind of.
Mm.
But that was not the case, you know.
Right.
Anyway,
Christed faces is amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
Unsolvable paradox. Met in Christed faces.
yes, yes,
Hmm.
it was beautiful, beautiful people and happy. And yet this child in a little lean-to orphanage, in a sense, with burned feet. It was that summer. Well, all the summers were hot, but it was one of those very horrible ones with the fires. And like an 18-month-old baby that would not let anyone hold him because his feet were literally scalded. And so you know, you just left with,
Yeah.
and you have nothing to say, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah. An inquisition on what
We lose Peter.
I think he had to take care of his dogs or something.
Yeah.
One of the suggestions, John, when you were trying to get your update to work,
Yeah.
he could come over and hang out at your place and participate. Peter said his dogs would not be willing to allow that to occur.
Sorry, I just had to put the dogs outside because they were beginning to give me a hard time here. What I want to say about Sarah's poem, particularly in terms of your question, Jared, of how, Sarah wrote that originally as a journal entry, and then she worked hard, really, really, really hard across 6 weeks of our Dancing Catfish workshop to get the poem actually to the point where it is at the moment, where it actually has so strongly impressed all of us. And, you know, it reminds me of, I think, Jean, you mentioned earlier that Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowell were friends, and you also mentioned the art of losing things. And she worked on that poem for 14 years.
Right. Yeah.
So, John, you're in good company.
That's right.
Okay, this poem I wrote in South Africa, and I only mention that because I'll talk of the Christmas heat. Remember, it's the Southern Hemisphere. Christmas would be as hot as we are in August, and people would still put up pine trees with little flakes of cotton wool on them to mimic snow. That's what it's like to be in a colony. You know, we can never forget that actually we're in the wrong place. Okay, heat wave. I flopped the foam rubber mattress under the only tree in the yard, an upstart prunus. Its leaves are diseased. Each year at this time, a fleck appears on the tip of each leaf, like a sore on your tongue, and spreads until the prunus branches are rotted and black, stripped of speech. A bush that could not burn, even in the Christmas heat. We need to cut to, yeah. Today, at least, the foliage thrusts up full and rich, bloody as beetroot at heart, while the sun splits through in eye-stabbing cheeriness. The air hangs heavy, too heavy to breathe. The grass is lush, knee-deep. I'll have to chop it soon, i.e. once the lawnmower is fixed. But now and for the rest of the afternoon, I shall lie here and drift like a man at sea on a slow-turning raft. My only company, a sexy thriller, and ignore any guilt growing up. A couple of beers I dug from the fridge stand sweating frost. I lick their tops, the pure, dull tin. Lie back and stretch, glad of the lazy bulge in my underpants, glad even of the heat, while under the shell of the ground, endlessly well the black waters that back up and dam in my skull. But I can't give way, not yet. An ant bites my wrist. I rub it out quick. It vexes me though, like a spot on a leaf. It's one of those poems that came out during the whole huge liberation struggle that my country went through, and that your country probably won't go through, because the South Africans didn't win the white South Africans I'm talking about, didn't win the colonial game. The colonial game is won when the colonizers outnumber the colonized. They never did that. America did, but South Africa didn't. And so we have a different country today. But I think America is stuck with its own unless ultimately immigration tips the balances. Anyhow, let me not continue about that.
I like it. Drift like a man at sea on a slow turn. Yeah.
The poems tend to be quite violent coming out of that time, of course.
Yeah, but this is a pause during the heat wave. Like, I shall lie here and drift like a man at sea on a slow turning raft. Yes. Mm.
Yeah, which leads us actually into the Crusoe poems that I began to write. And what I've done with the Crusoe poems, which is what we can move to next, is I've included two of the poems that would come from the man who was called by Crusoe Friday, which have been very difficult for me to write because I rejected the South African white liberal stance, which was that white liberals could talk for Black people. In fact, Steve Biko, the leader of the Black consciousness movement, who was later beaten to death in the same city that I mentioned earlier, Port Elizabeth. I used to drive past the, this was years later, 2002, 2004. I used to drive past the police station where he was beaten to death. Steve Biko challenged the white liberals and got them out. But the problem I felt was that whites could not speak for Black people. Now, a major writer from my own country, J.M. Coetzee, Nobel Prize winner, has written a book called Foe, which of course is the last bit of Daniel Defoe. And he's also playing on the idea of foe, where he has revised, rewritten Robinson Crusoe. Now, I hadn't read Robinson Crusoe when I wrote the Crusoe poems. I'm glad I hadn't, because it's unbelievably the Bible of colonialism. Anyway, for me to write, what Coetzee does is he allows Friday into the book, but Friday's tongue has been cut out. So Coetzee neatly sidesteps having to speak for Friday, but he also, and I think this is the ambiguity of it which makes me uncomfortable, he deprives Friday of speech. This is a time when Black writers were writing up a storm in South Africa, and they certainly did have a voice. In fact, they were far more easily published than white writers by the liberal press. So the problem for me was, do I give Friday a voice? And then I realized, well, I could put words into Friday's mouth, but actually state that I'm putting words into Friday's mouth, which, when we get onto the Crusoe poem. So I've put one Crusoe poem, which is the notion that Crusoe feels of, this is in the original text. There's the notion that the Black people come from outside, and they come from a different island, and they're going to cannibalize Friday, and then Crusoe saves Friday, and Friday begins to worship Crusoe. Yuck. Okay, but the Crusoe poems have this epigraph: incipit tragedia, incipit parodia, by Nietzsche, which means the tragedy begins, the parody begins, and I've tried to build both parodic and, to some extent, tragic elements into the poems. One only realizes these things, and I think that this is where Jean is so right. You don't know what you're writing until you've written it. All that I've said here is in retrospect. So this is the island. Oh, this is allegorical writing. John and I often bitch about postmodernism, and I realized belatedly that the Crusoe poems are a bloody postmodernist version, because they are allegorical and they build off and sometimes parody previous texts. So this has come back to bite me in the butt. Okay, the island. Crusoe called the island crumb, bit of dried bird shit, grit in the eye, twist in the gut, numb emptiness. The facts were cracked black lava stones, dead hairy trees, and the surf, the eternal surf, and day after day, the sun. Crusoe called himself dust, void, farts worth of effort. With a stick, he drew stick-like scratches in the dust. Sign, he said, under sign of erasure. His brain pan he called spittoon for the stars. His arms and legs, dried branches. When he lifted his hat, lice only itched their way to a tighter arrangement. Repeat myself? Crusoe called his flintlock cock, its hammer beak, its fiery streak and roar hot drum. All day he spent rubbing rust from iron. A harsh taste blossomed, dried blood. And at night, fire hung behind the mountain. Where surf's teeth crush, invaders' paddles flash, peacock feathers flared and hung from his wet lashes. Crusoe raised his gun against the sun. Blood, he called blood, stone, stone, and air, narrow passage for thunder. So that's the Crusoe. So if we move on to the next poem, and we can do these all together. Here's Words in Friday's Mouth. Now, I have to give trigger warnings here because, Sarah spoke about the courthouse in the 1930s here. And one of the ways that, political, obviously the lynching of black men was and always has been political, a way of keeping them down. But a lot of it was focused on white men's feelings of inferiority, sexual inferiority, focused on their genitals, on their penises. Students of mine, when I showed them some of the Crusoe poems, some of the young men afterwards told me that, oh, it was absolutely true that black men, this they gleaned from pornography apparently on the internet. The black men are far more heavily endowed than white men. So there is a focus in the poems on the phallocentricity of the struggle between white and black. And a further just a comment, what a servant gets to know is the intimate details, even the intimate dirt of their masters. And this comes up in the this poem called Words in Friday's Mouth. Skull, hourglass, echo. Nothing. Nothing will come of nothing. And so it has. So it has. How many years, Crusoe? How many long years now have you been? How many still will you be hanging around? You don't really think, do you, that somehow, sometime, someone, she, will arise from the deep, her face, her body gleaming, pale as pearl above the sea foam curdling of her father's torn and bleeding genitals, to cry, "Oh, love, my love, I've come for you." Let's go up. Or is it secretly you hope some other mighty moment will arrive, and in a crack of thunder reveal to the world you, naked, golden, pure and shining, a mirror to the sun, a god? You old mole, you, half blind, burrowing around in your own stink, hiding in the shadow of this rock as far as you can in a corner, helplessly jerking your dick. So there's Friday's resentment, Crusoe. And then 3 chants for Friday's child. And these are simply little chants that, behind this lies the fact that the South African police were shooting down children in the townships. And maybe it's right that you can't write too directly about those things, although I've tried. Anyway, here's again words in the mouths of the children. Sick craw Crusoe, evil worm in belly, 2-prong fork eyes, give me back my penny. Tin can, what a shock, long skinny skewer cock, white man on a rock, one is one too many. Never mind the mudfish, never mind the show. Sick craw Crusoe, go suck ass in hell. The first one. Okay, here's the second one. Screwjaw Crusoe, eye a twisted pin. Whitey in a dustbin, how did you get in? Hopping in is one thing, hopping out another. Gonna chop your nuts off, save you the bother. And then the third one. Dead-eye Crusoe, dead-eye Dick. Down with you, lick my shoe, you so Crusoe, Crusoe do so, quick. That's a lot. Okay, so those are the poems.
Those are wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are. They're so raw, and there's so much emotion. Yeah, really powerful stuff. And one thing I love about your poetry too, Peter, is how musical it is.
Mhm.
My father
Yes.
would be pleased to hear that because he used to clobber me for not having any bloody musical ear at all. He was an opera singer and a wrestler and a boxer, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. And he wanted to sing like Caruso, but then they threw him out of the ring, the wrestling ring, and he nearly broke his neck. He actually did smash his vocal cords.
Wow.
And so his voice was very jingly. But I tried to play the guitar and he clobbered me for that. And I once sang Moon River and I got part of it right. And he said to me, sing it again. And then it went all wrong. So I got clobbered again. So for him to hear that this is musical. By the way, he wrote a novel in Afrikaans. Yeah, I'm half Afrikaans. And it had a terrible title. It was called Minnie Minnaar, which means something like Bonnie Beloved. And it was a terrible novel. And I loved it. And I lost it, come to this bloody country.
Aw.
Anyhow, so he would have been, I think he would have been shocked and appalled at what I'm writing. So I'm probably a bit lucky that, you know, I'm here and he's not here.
No, the sound, obviously, I mean, the sound
Yeah.
is so powerful in your poetry. You know, just the noise.
Yeah, I like that, the noise.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was hard to come up with a solution to the Friday quote unquote problem.
Hmm.
But as you can see, you know, it worked from this thing that John pointed out, the lying on a raft with this turning.
Right.
But, you know, again, to go back to Jared's question of how these poems arise, you know, my very, very first story that I ever did, which was when I was in first grade, I drew a man on a ship. The ship hits a rock. The man plunges out of the ship, swims, climbs up onto an island. It was a graphic novel.
Wow.
So I think that these things are very, very deep.
Mm.
I think that, you know, they come from, you know, people say, where does the poem come from? And they say, oh, well, you know, I was lying under a tree and I thought of the poem. But actually, it's much, much deeper than that. It goes back much, much further. And what I think, you know, and I think you can find this in the actual book of Robinson Crusoe, which I don't recommend anyone to read. He feels he's born again after the sea throws him out onto the island. It's actually a birth image. And I think that one of the things here was an image of actual birth lies behind this, the sense of being cast out and then a finding that it's not final. So I think that, you know, I think that these things, there's a palimpsest to writing a poem. It doesn't just come from, it doesn't, you know, I think that that where it comes from is also multidimensional. And there's a sort of melange of things in our minds that bring these things forward. I have got, you know, these poems have come up over many years, and I go back to them and back to them and back to them. I'm as bad at a reviser as John is, and that's saying something. He's always bloody revising. And, you know, especially I mustn't say anything about a poem because then he revises it 3 or 4 times. Anyway, good. Yes, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate them.
Friday's voice sounds very real.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds more real in a way than Crusoe's voice.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's good.
I like the chants.
Yeah.
I like the chants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the sensual nature of the island and the feeling of my tongue on the pure dull tin, and there's so much tension in this last part that's like although you're expressing that there's this moment in the heat of relaxing under the tree on the raft, you're not really relaxing on the raft. There's this building up, it's like I'm feeling all of that with you. So that's kind of like my sense of,
Like the spot on the
yeah, like,
K or something.
well, yeah, I mean, the next thing is that you're going to rot. Like
Mhm.
yeah, you're gonna, the black liquid is going to be working on you from in your skull and the spot, and you're just gonna rot away while you're spinning on the raft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
also, I just want to say I really like that Crusoe seems so impotent, and Friday is very aware of
Yeah.
his
Well, the
power.
next Friday poem actually deals with Crusoe as, in fact, impotent,
Mhm.
which is, the one I didn't. Maybe another time I'll bring it.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
So, are you going to do Are you going to tell us which Billy Collins poem to look for next time?
Yes, let's see, what is it called? It's a really famous one and I can't think of the name of it. right
Oh, you can email it to Jared, and Jared will email it to
Okay.
us.
Yes, I'll find it. I like his poetry. A lot of people think, I don't know, too easy, but
That's the poem about reading a poem.
yeah. It's great. I mean, he says it really well. And if
Mhm.
if you've had to teach literary criticism, oh my God, it gets painful listening to people try to make sense of something that's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to open you up in some other way.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not your conscious mind. The
Sure.
conscious mind can't be in control of everything, even though it wants to be.
Yeah.
Well, again, we have a culture that suggests that we have to have a sort of rational, conceptual understanding of everything that we are, and we have to be able to offer definitions and explanations and labels.
Yeah.
And I know for sure that I'm not designed for any of that to work.
No, none of us are. So bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, bullshit.
so poets unite. We need
Yeah, that's a good idea.
to
Yeah.
change the world.
We've got
So-
nothing
There's-
to lose but our reason.
There's a Collins poem that's actually called Introduction to Poetry.
That's it.
I asked them to take a poem and hold
That's
it up to the light.
Yes.
Oh, I
Okay, so-
love it already.
Yeah. It's a great poem.
Yeah.
Right. We'll do that for next time.
That'll be our focus for next month.
Great.
Good.
Okay.
Right.
Do we know the
Adios.
dates for next month?
Thank
Sorry.
Do we know the dates for next month?
Let me see if I can get to it.
No big deal. Just curious.
I think I can get to it really quickly on this. It's
Well,
typically
I'm going to bid you adieu.
good
Okay.
night. We're
Thank
meeting again on July 18th, Saturday, July 18th.
Awesome.
Good.
Love
And
you all. See you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Jared.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This was inspiring.
Always.